who's a Raiders fan, who's a fan of Henry Ruggs as a player and a person, who's a fan of the NFL and how the league helps, in particular, young black athletes who may come from marginal backgrounds to better life. And this is a very sad day all around because the former Oakland Raiders, now Las Vegas Raiders, I guess I'm not shook up, decided to cut him, unceremoniously cut him and tweet about it, which I don't know what good that really does except inform us of something that's very terrible and arguably questionable for a whole host of reasons. And to help you understand, although I can understand I might not be able to exactly understand if you don't sympathize with what I'm about to say, okay? I'll be candid with you. But there's something that I want you to understand and realize going forward here about what I'm about to explain, because I was there, and it was a unforgettable night of February 29th of 2020. Before there was any thought of the pandemic, at a cold Indianapolis, at the Marriott that Friday night, in the restaurant lounge, watching what was actually occurring at Lucas Oil Stadium just a few yards away, but in the eyeballs of every football fan in the United States and the world. The 40-yard dash for the combine. And to my surprise, sat next to me someone that I met at the NFL owners meeting the previous year, and that was Gina Lane, who is a great writer for ESPN, covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And she introduced me to Henry Ruggs' trainer. We didn't know what Henry Ruggs was about to do. The Alabama Crimson Tide star went on to post a 4.27 40-yard dash. Now, to help you understand how remarkable that is, there's only one other person that ran faster in the history of the combine, and that's Jonathan Ross, who posted a 4.23 just about 2 years prior. Yes, they're getting faster, aren't they? But the knock on Ross was, well, hey, injury prone, has happened. Not the greatest receiver, needs more reps. But that wasn't the case for Henry Ruggs. Henry Ruggs could catch and run. It was dangerous. And then, as we all know, the Las Vegas Raiders, which, when they were the Oakland Raiders, had a tendency, and sometimes as the Las Vegas Raiders too, to draft players that made you scratch your head, didn't do it in this case. Much. They got the great guy, Henry Ruggs. And I say all that for this reason. And I thank you for posting what you just did. I'm going to read that comment, see if I can find that and make sure it's read. But I say it for this reason. There are people whose livelihoods, like Ruggs' trainer, and by extension, people who form media companies around the NFL or who are paid by organizations like ESPN, as is Ms. Lane, whose livelihoods are tied to the very appearance of superhumans like Henry Ruggs. And undoubtedly had his share of hangers-on and money from family and everything else that comes with becoming a very quickly rich young man, particularly a very quickly rich young black man in America. Let's be honest. We're not out of that yet. But what happens when a team, and I have to give the Raiders credit for hanging in there with players like Gary and Conley, as I mentioned before, and Josh Jacobs this year when he got his DUI. But in the case of Henry Ruggs, to announce that he was cut so quickly seems to imply that they're just done with him in a situation that they created for him. What do I mean? Well, I just set the stage for you. Mike Mayock was there when Ruggs, he was at the Combine, at Lucas Oil, and then I saw him walk by where I was sitting at the Marriott a few hours later on his way to his room, okay? We were all there. They staked their claim to Henry Ruggs. So as far as I'm concerned, cutting him was the wrong thing to do. He made the worst mistake of all, but think of when he made the mistake. 3 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. Isn't Tuesday the sanctioned off day for NFL players? Who does that? Henry doesn't do it. They do. Did anybody structure Henry's life for him with the Raiders? Did anybody say to Henry, hey, you know what? We have some rules for us, particularly because we're in Las Vegas, that you need to follow. And I say particularly because we're in Las Vegas in italics, because a number of people, a number of Oakland fans, people with, and I think actually it was Forever Oakland members that made this point more often than others. And it's something that you can't disagree with now. That if the Raiders were to move to Las Vegas, the players are more likely to get into trouble. And already we've had 2 key players on the silver and black gain DUIs. Star young players. Josh Jacobs and now Henry Ruggs. Who's next? Who's next? This has occurred just this year. Okay? This has occurred just this year. At some point, you have to say it's not their fault. At some point, you have to look at the organization and say, what's going on here that you're allowing these players to get into trouble? They are your responsibility because you went through trouble and money to scout them, to measure them, to draft them, and then to play them, and then to give them necessary resources to make sure their bodies were in tip-top shape. Okay? And as I'm reminded, this is a great point. One of my viewers says Jacobs didn't get a DUI, but he was originally accused of one. It was dismissed. Legally, he didn't get it. But all I have to do, simply because of one factoid I'm going to introduce, is type what I'm about to type and stop, and then hit return. And what I find simply is January 11th, 2021, Raiders running back Josh Jacobs won't face DUI charges. Why? Because he was initially reported as about to face them. Okay? All right? Raiders running back Josh Jacobs charged with failure to exercise due care. All right? It was reduced. He was booked on suspicion of driving under the influence. Shall I go on? Shall I go on? That occurred this year. So again, the question remains and is on the floor. What is the organization doing that is allowing its star players to simply just run free in Las Vegas and get behind the wheel? It's an extension of what I said, okay? extension of what I said of, and I'm loving this by the attorney. I understand that, okay? My point is this. I've said this before and I'll say this again. The Raiders have a great legal team. They have great legal contacts. But at some point, I think the point is right now, that extra step needs to be taken. And I've talked about this again and again with regular viewers that the National Football League needs to take better care of its players so that they don't get in situations like this. But the simple fact of the matter is that the Raiders blame responsibility. All right? The Raiders blame responsibility for the situation that was set up for Henry Ruggs to step into. Did they have some sort of disclaimer regarding what not to do? What to do when they find themselves in a situation? He was a female in the car. How many times have I said that NFL players should have a database of women, suggested women to date, background check, know who they are, and if they're going to go out with a player, they should know what to do to keep the player out of trouble. Again, this may sound heavy-handed, but think back to what I talked about when we started this discussion, if you will. It's not really a discussion because I don't have the rest of you on here. I'll change that later in the week. But my point is this. Think about it. The millions of dollars spent trying to find and then make sure they're able to draft the Henry Ruggs of the world. And then pay them money and bring them in. And market their jerseys. Hey, jersey sales, right? Raiders stand to lose a lot of money in declined jersey sales because he's not a Raider anymore. Is there anyone out there that thinks the better scenario would be to take care of their investment and make sure that the returns on the investment that they made in Henry Ruggs continue well onto the future? Of course. And then there's that other question that should be asked about that talk that the Raiders should have done with Henry. You know the talk I'm talking about, the talk that we say every young black man should have about racism, about what's out there, okay? About how not to get into trouble. When we're with an NFL team, it has to be more than talk. It has to be sanctioned. The talk has to be fashioned into sanctioned rules. You are responsible for kids. I've said this with respect to young black players that come out of the South and go to the Bay Area, a place known for a certain group of women who are the adult Bay Area equivalent of the cheap cleat chasers, that are known to populate Florida. You heard what I said. It's time, really past time, for real talk. And the real talk should translate into real action. The Raiders cannot believe or get anyone else to believe that they are not to blame for this. They shouldn't just discard Henry and allow him to be cast off to state prison just like that, as if to say they had nothing to do with it, when in point of fact, they set up the situation for him. They brought him to Las Vegas. They gave him the money to get housing there. They set the situation. No one else did other than the Raiders. So the Raiders need to go the full distance and take care of the man as best they can. Make sure he gets the right legal representation, all right? And make sure that they're taken care of. And anyone who argues that they're over 18, that's not flying here. Forget it, okay? You're obviously new to this channel. That doesn't fly. Go elsewhere. Go elsewhere. Long past that. And the reason why I say that is this. There are too many people out there who, under the, oh, they're 18 and let them be men, then turn around and try to use those same kids to get over on them and resent it when their parents get involved or anyone else. Get out of my channel. Okay? Get out of my channel or I'll kick you out. Now. I mean it. I'm not putting up with this. Okay? Zero tolerance for people who want to use kids. It's despicable. It's ugly. It's wrong. And that's what anyone is advocating at all. Anyone is advocating. Okay? Anyone is advocating. So, my point is simply this, and I believe it, and you're out. Okay? You're out. I am not tolerating this from anybody. Okay? Period. Go elsewhere at all. Go elsewhere. Make your own videos, but do not come to my channel advocating the use of kids. Period. Period. We've said it before, and I'll say it again. You don't take advantage of a person because they're young. I remember that was done to me. It was at Texas Arlington. It was these people that were selling these coupons, you know. I didn't know what they were or how they really worked. Neither did my roommate. Next thing I know, it's some sort of bullying thing where I had to buy something. This is before the internet. And the guy was making all these harassing phone calls. And scared me with the idea that basically was going to beat me up or something. And then one day, I got mad. And I was talking to my mom about it. He was going to fly down. I said, no, Mom, don't fly down. Okay? I went to his office with my roommate. And when he was before us, face to face, was that a man-building experience for me? Yeah, it was. I wasn't even 18, it was like 17. Okay? It was. But my point is, this guy was a shyster who took advantage of kids at Texas Arlington trying to take their money. All right? The same kind of person who would say, well, they're 18, they can live on their own, they don't need anybody to look out for them. Ooh, what a crook you are. What an asshole you are. What an evil person you are. Because that's precisely what you are. I don't think the Raiders want to be regarded that way. All right? I don't think the Raiders want to be regarded that way, and I don't think the league does either. This tarnishes the NFL that this occurred. Okay? Period. End of story. Peanut Butter's got a great point. Thinks the Athletic should think twice about Vegas. You know? I mean, this is a big, ugly mess. This shouldn't happen to anyone. And you would say, what are the similarities between this and John Gruden? And you would say none. I would say plenty. I said it in the case of Coach Gruden, and I'll say it now. Remember when I said friends don't let friends drive drunk? There we go. Okay, that's better. Had a little freeze there. Well, my point is, remember when I said that friends don't let friends drive drunk? Friends don't let friends drive drunk. Friends don't let friends drive drunk. The Raiders should not let their friends drive drunk. In the case of John Gruden, same thing. They allowed him to write these emails knowing that they were nasty and not protecting him in the sense of saying, hey, you know what? You shouldn't express yourself like this in writing. It can come back to haunt you. To which he would send an email saying, hey, you know what? I wrote something, or delete, right? Or just write something that says, you know what? I was writing something and I was so tired I didn't know I was writing. Please forgive me. Something like that. But they didn't do that. Now, by contrast, I had a friend on not too long ago who used some language that others could use against him. I took that segment of the interview, I took that out, I called him, and I said, you can't do that today. It's wrong. He really appreciated it. And we're friends to this day, better friends because of that. How many of you have done that? We're only as good as who we associate with. That goes for organizations. The organization is only as good as the degree to which it takes care of the people within it. If they don't take care of the people, you can't just cast them off. It still reflects on you. That's a fact. John Gruden's actions aren't all John Gruden's fault. They're the fault of people who allowed him to be that way and then used his bad behavior as an instrumentality toward his own demise. Arguably, that's what the Raiders did in the case of Henry Ruggs. It's probably the case that this wasn't the first time that Ruggs went out cocktailing. And the question is, did the Raiders talk to him about that before? Did they take any kind of action to make him stop? This is the time to take responsibility for people. This is not the time to say, he's 18, he's a kid, he can do what he wants, and we're not responsible. No, you are responsible. You are responsible. And cutting him and brooming him should not and won't absolve you of what happened to that person in the Toyota RAV4 who was rear-ended. That is the most horrifying of situations. The most incredibly horrifying of situations. Something that, and the reason why I really cry for Henry Ruggs is because I go back to that time at the Marriott and the just sheer joy erupting from the hotel over the performance, the historic performance of this man. How happy his trainer was, leaping around, celebrating, high-fiving with anybody in distance, including myself. I was only 5 feet away. He and I had, Jenna, she's only like, 5 foot between us, okay? Sheer joy. I feel for him. I feel for his parents. I feel for his loved ones. Hey, Mike Lowry, I know you tried to call, but I can't take this call while I'm doing that, okay? Let me talk, okay? So my point is that Ruggs deserves our prayers and our support, and the Raiders need to get back in there with both feet and help him by any means necessary. Why? Because they went to go after him to make him a Raider by literally any means necessary. This isn't a time to say, well, he was an adult and he knew better. No. No. The time when a person is an adult doesn't start just because they left college at all. It's a process. And when the person goes from child to adult is after they've lived some life, after they've gotten out of college. Henry Ruggs is still learning everything about life, away from home, away from people. Give him another, you know what? Give him 5 years. Just because you birthed a child doesn't mean You're an adult. It means you birthed a child. That's the problem today. We've popularized being teen moms and everything, which completely covers up the fact that we don't give resources to parents to raise kids the right way, that we have a whole generation of kids that will raise that way without the proper resources, and then we let them loose in the world, which has no sympathy for teen moms or resources that can serve them. That's why the Child Act that was recently passed was so helpful. We have an ugly attitude about taking care of each other in the society that's gotten worse. There's no true, logical, reasonable justification for it, okay? At all. Because his pain is our pain. Someone else's suffering becomes our suffering. Someone else on the street that doesn't have money becomes the person that we have to make sure has money for. That person who becomes mentally ill becomes our next criminal. We hope not. All of this is our fault. It's not someone else's problem. And the sooner we realize that as a collective, as people, the faster the United States of America will come back to stature. Why? Because when we were more of a mono-ethnic country, we were less diverse. It seemed we had a better habit of taking care of each other. Why? Because most of the time we were white, which helped to cover up the racism that was being exacted on people that look like me. Well, guess what? Now we're diverse. Okay? Wonderfully and beautifully we're diverse in a Star Trek form of way. Star Trek should always be our guide. Why? Because Star Trek, as it was put in one episode, you don't have to worry about money anymore. You want to be an artist? Be an artist. Want to do something that advances personkind? Do it. There are all kinds of ways to be a responsible citizen without worrying about whether or not you're going to have a roof over your head. That's the kind of society we must strive for. It's not socialist. It is utopian in a way. But it is achievable. And it's achievable with one simple idea: that we care for each other. And our corporations must set the tone for that. If our corporations don't, and our governments don't, the United States as a society and as an ideal will fail. Subscribe to Zinni62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com.